Hello, everyone, and welcome to Debra and Peter are doing a podcast. I think this is episode 8. And Debra, how are you? How are things?
I'm good, thanks, Peter. Yeah, I'm on really good form at the moment, which is a great place to be.
Excellent. Well, I have decided that I would like to talk about Blackpool on today's podcast, hence my hat. And my scarf, which has been up for a while, because I've just been chairing the Blackpool Better Start annual conference. And Blackpool Better Start is, I think, the most exciting, transformative and interesting piece of public service reform that I am involved in. And it's a partnership across the town, which has been funded by those wonderful people at the National Lottery Community Fund over an extended period. And the ambition of the programme was to get -6 month to 2-3-year-olds the best possible start in life, so as many little ones are ready for school as possible. And 5 areas received 9-year grants from the lottery to work together to try and transform those outcomes for little ones. And there were only 5 partnerships that were awarded, and they had to be led by charities, but they had to include all the partners in the area who could make a difference to the life chances of the little ones. So we, the NSPCC, were successful in working together with the council at Blackpool, the hospital, the police, local businesses, of vital importance to the community themselves, to fashion a programme of activity that was going to improve these outcomes for children. It was a condition of the programme that you had to lever in significant resources from beyond what the lottery was putting in, so that we could, in the jargon, bend mainstream programmes and influence practice. And we're now coming to the end of the period of the lottery grant, and I've been chairing the Blackpool Better Start board for some time now. But what we have is a shared sense of leadership for little ones across the town, a really strong injection of community influence over where the money is being spent, and members of the community who are community connectors out in the community and really making those connections with the parents and the little ones who are least likely to access statutory services, and a workforce in all the various statutory services who have developed a common language which is kind of grounded in the very best of early years practice with the latest brain science and all the rest of it. And the outcomes are significant, particularly for babies from households with the lowest index of multiple deprivation figures across the town. And you know, the lessons in terms of partnership working, how you take decisions with one another, have been materially different as a consequence of us having this single unifying purpose together over a really extended period. So it was lovely to chair the conference and reflect on and celebrate some of the progress that's been made. And you know, whatever happens beyond the lottery grant, there's a kind of way of working in Blackpool that I find quite inspirational, and there's a lot which other places can learn from it, and actually a lot of lessons around what makes for really good public service reform, I think, that could be applied in all sorts of other contexts. So that's my little kind of celebration of Blackpool, hence the hat and the scarf and
I mean, that
everything.
sounds amazing, Peter. There's just always that little part of me that thinks that how do you future-proof brilliant initiatives like that so they don't get trashed by some future government? Because I remember Sure Start, as I'm sure you do, which was very popular, super successful, really made profound differences in the lives of families and young people that now doesn't exist, pretty
Well,
much. You know,
so
age of quality protection.
so our guest speaker at the conference was Naomi Eisenstadt, the
Oh, really?
leader of
Okay.
Pure Start.
Yeah.
So she is aware of what we're up to, and yes, there are some characteristics of that way of working that infuse what's happened here. I mean, I guess we in Blackpool there are enough. All the key people who matter in the town are implicated and associated with decisions that have been taken over now, 9 years. So there is a way of working that even if someone came with the intent of trying to destroy it, would find it quite difficult because the relationships and the language which the services use when they're talking to one another are quite well embedded. So take, for example, when COVID struck, and for lots of very good reasons, resource in the NHS was diverted rapidly towards old people who were at risk of dying. Lots of other services were hollowed out, including health visiting. Now, in Blackpool, in our conversation, there was nothing more important to the outcomes of little ones than preserving health visiting face to face, if at all possible, but if not face to face, then from the end of the garden. And that regularity of connection with families of a little one survived all the way through the lockdown. And after 9 months or so, the NHS had to issue a circular to the country to say you must not hollow out your health visiting. And it didn't matter in Blackpool because decisions had been taken from a different frame. So the kind of, I think the longevity of the grant was really important. The requirement that you had to bend mainstream programs, the shared accountability, all the governance that required us to have that conversation and then say, well, no, we can't stop the health visiting because even if you're coming under pressure in the NHS, that's not what will work for the babies in this particular program we're on, was really encouraging.
Well, I hope it, because anything that involves the community and that gets the community to be sticky at it has got to be good. It tends to be when things are imposed from above centrally, isn't it? Those are the things that tend to be more fragile. I just, hope that it's so successful that any future government would be off its trolley to try and interfere or do things differently or change the direction of travel. It's always more complicated, isn't it, when you've got multi-agencies as well as, charities and other organisations involved in this sort of thing, because you've got so many competing pressures and needs. So, it's a massive success if you've been enabled to create a space where those people are coming together with a common agenda. So hopefully, because it sounds fantastic, it really does.
Yeah, no, it's good, and of course, the more you learn, the more you've got to do, so there's no harder place to try and make this sort of stuff work than in Blackpool. There's some challenging things about the town in terms of its housing stock, in terms of the way in which transient male workforce kind of comes in for the summer and then disappears, leaving behind
children,
pregnant women, and it's but it's been fascinating, and so my mind is kind of full of wanting to kind of celebrate Blackpool, but also try and think about what can be done to enable this approach to work in other places, because a lot of what is happening is because people know and understand and appreciate Blackpool and the particular characteristics of the people there. So you can't sort of just lift it up and drop it somewhere else, but the disciplines and the ways of thinking,
probably,
and the decision making, lots of these things I think are highly transferable.
Yeah. I'm a bit disappointed though, because I really thought when you said Blackpool and you had that lovely glittery hat on, I really thought you were going to tell me that you'd been at the Strictly Come Dancing Blackpool leg. So, you know, I've gone from feeling full of hope and saying, can you get me a ticket? It's like, oh, okay, it was about changing the world and making life better for children. Our ticket to Peter.
No, I'm sorry, I haven't. I can't get you. Well, I probably could get you a ticket for Blackpool Strictly Come Dancing.
Maybe, yeah, I'd love to go.
I'll see what I can do. I probably have more friends in Blackpool than than other towns in England.
On one of our podcasts, man, we were talking about gifts and like connections and things like that. And I suddenly thought, should we be saying out loud on a podcast, can you wangle me a ticket for Strictly? Let's rewind that.
If you declare it, it's okay.
Of course, compete the same as everybody else does, Peter, because I believe in justice and equality. We'll enter the lottery like they all do. So what else have we got to talk about this week? What else has been on your mind?
I was quite interested in, there was I read somewhere that the previous government got into a bit of a spat with a local authority that had decided to let all its staff work compressed hours across a 4-day week, and that the current government has dropped the idea of opposing that. And I know that you have faced up to different working patterns at the Directory for Social Change. So yeah, I would be interested in hearing from you about 4-day weeks and how that has gone.
Well, can I tell you, Peter, honestly, it is probably one of the best decisions I have made in my entire life, was convincing my trustees and, you know, talking to the staff about having a compressed working week. Actually, we're very specific at DSC, though. We don't call it a 4-day working week. We call it a 3-day weekend. Because the reason we introduced it started in the pandemic, and what we realised, we were working a skeleton crew, obviously, for a long period of time, because we had to furlough a lot of our staff because we weren't getting any money coming in, much like many other organisations. And what that meant is that my skeleton crew, which is what we called them, were absolutely shattered, because we were trying to run the whole organisation, trying to completely recreate the way we reached out to the people we serve, like suddenly taking face-to-face courses and conferences, trying to turn them into online content and things like that. So it was massive, and keep the thing afloat. And they were knackered. So we experimented with this 3-day weekend. We said people need 2 days at the weekend is just not enough. You're not getting enough rest. And also you've got to cram in all your other, you know, home chores at the weekend. So we introduced this 3-day week. What we did is we had it 3-day weekends. So it was driven by wanting our staff to be well. That's where it came from. And the way we do it at DSC now is, so it's now permanent, and it's a permanent term and condition, but we have what's called a Friday crew and a Monday crew. So we still operate 5 days a week. It's just that the team's split up. So some people do Friday, some people do Monday. Most people do Monday because they want the Friday off. So we have a very small crew on a Friday, which feels like quite a special crew, the Friday crew, because there's not very many of us. But anyway, so we're always covering, so always there to deal with the people that we serve, the charities that we serve. But it means that everybody gets either a Friday, Saturday, Sunday off, or a Saturday, Sunday, Monday. And I cannot tell you how it's transformed the working experience of my people. Their motivation is really high. Productivity went through the roof. We publish a book called Guide for Individuals in Need, and it was legendary in DSC that was always late. We were always behind on the research data entries. We were always behind on the publication date. It always happened. In the year we introduced this, it was finished like something like 6 weeks early. You know, this. So we know productivity's gone up because we can actually measure it. Because most of our staff do jobs where you can see the output of those jobs. You know, we don't have to. You know, so it was. So what we did, we couldn't afford to reduce the hours. So we basically said 35 hours in 4 days. But the other thing that we said was that we won't count the hours. So we trust you completely. We will never ask you about the hours you're working unless your performance drops off. And then it'll be the first question we ask. will be, are you using all of your hours? Are you allocating enough time to get this work done? We've never, ever, ever had to ask that question, Peter, because honestly, people work really, really hard. And again, we do surveys and we have conversations with them, and it feeds back in one-to-ones and in the staff forum, because we have a staff forum where they talk to me directly. They're always incredibly positive about it. And the fact that, so what most of them do is the Friday or the Monday, whichever one they have, they tend to use that for chores or their personal exercise regimes or things like that. So they've got Saturday and a Sunday, which aligns them with kids being home and their partners also having a weekend. So they're able to fully dedicate themselves to their family time. A best decision we've ever made, and productivity went absolutely through the roof, went straight up.
That's fascinating. And you've sort of answered some of my skepticism, I think, about it. I mean, I'm quite anti one size fits all. And my instinct is, why should everyone have a 4-day week? If some people want a 4-day week, that's fine. But some people might want a 5-day week. Some people might want a 2-day week. There's a complicating factor, I think, at the NSPCC, because we have our helpline and childline where we need people to work shifts in particular hours, to particular patterns, in order to be able to fulfill the requirement that we're here 24/7. And if you don't get that patchwork of shifts working right, so
it's doable.
And I think sometimes people who like the idea of working the hours that suit them can sound disrespectful to those who are also in the organisation, who don't enjoy quite the same flexibility because of the outcome that we're seeking to achieve. So I've had to sort of juggle that. I think we're good on flexible working and giving people the options, but there's something, I don't know if it's the Treasury official in me or something, but I'm constantly, there's a niggle for me that people if get out of balance the value to them of being able to do what they want when they want to do it, versus their obligation to the other members of their team and the children they're here to get things done.
That's down to poor management and leadership, Peter, always. If your staff are not delivering, it's 99% of the time, it's not because they're rubbish and lazy and awful, it's because they're not being managed or led well. That's the reality of it. And we have very, very strong leadership and management at DSC, with a very, very engaged managers with their teams and those who work for them. And so we just haven't had that. And I think that, because when we first introduced it for the whole organisation, there were a couple of people who didn't want to do it, who wanted to work, whatever. Now, nobody wants to go back. Now even the people who are originally resistant to it are like, actually, this is brilliant. It's so much better for me. But the thing with DSC is, we can't afford for people to swing the lead. So, we have to have performance high. If it affected performance negatively, we would go back to a 5-day working week. But the reality is that's not what's happened. But I think what you have to do with these things, you've got to put frameworks around. So you have to talk about productivity. You have to say, we will trust you, but you've got to deliver the level of work. If you don't deliver the level of work, then we are going to have conversations. We're going to have a conversation with you about what's going on here and why you're not delivering. And very often it's going to be something completely separate to that anyway. So before it doesn't work when it's badly implemented. And the other thing we learned at DSC actually is, when we implemented it, we didn't solve any of the problems at all. We said to our staff, when they came up with the objections, we said, that's a really good point. How do we get around it? So they're the ones who came up with the idea of a Friday crew and a Monday crew. They're the ones who came up with the idea of, certain ways in which we make this happen and certain ways in which we allocate holidays and things like that. We didn't solve any of it for them. They did it. And I think, again, that's another mistake we make as leaders in organizations. We think we have to have the answers. I mean, I always say, like, if you have to have a set of FAQs with any strategic plan or anything you're planning to do in your organization, it's already failed. Because if you involve people, they will answers to those questions, because they provided the answers to those questions. You didn't, So, we just have it's taken a year. It doesn't happen overnight, but we have a very strong culture of trust. And also because the other thing is, because it's such an open culture, often a manager never has to say to a team member, you're swinging the lead. It's much more likely to be another team member saying, Debra, come on, where were you at that meeting? We had to wait for you. So it doesn't feel like it's coming down from the top. So I'm a massive advocate of it. And quite apart from anything else, it's incredibly good for people's mental health. A 5-day week kills people. We know that. I wanted to do it anyway before the pandemic. And
I'd do a
I'd read
7-day week if I could. That's
I
a
wanted
semi
to.
joke, but I don't know. I think saying 5-day a week kills people. Some people like to work 5 days.
Be volunteering, for goodness sake. There are other ways. Your paid job does not have to be your whole life, and you do masses of things outside of the NSPCC. So if the NSPCC is gone, you're not going to be bereft, Peter, because you've got loads of stuff you're doing. And in fact, I wanted to propose it in 2019 to my board because, in fact, I did. I suggested them we look at this because I'd read a book by a chap called Rutger Bregman. I don't know if you've come across him, but is he Danish? I think he's Danish or Dutch. Danish, I think. He's like a statistician, like a philosopher. He was at what's that place where all the World Economic Forum, he spoke there about. Yeah, he wrote a book called something for realists. Idealism for realists or something like that. It's a brilliant book. And what he did, he looked at things, for example, like minimum wages, and he looked at things like 3-day week, and he looked at places where these things had been tried out and all the rest of it. And he showed a lot of evidence that says that if we stop thinking in these traditional 9 to 5, 5 days a week working patterns, because somewhere along the line, back in sort of Victorian days, that's what we decided was going to be the working pattern. And we actually started working more creatively and more cleverly and thinking about how do you get the best out of people, we would completely change the way in which we all work. And of course, if you think about the NHS, most NHS workers don't have a 5-day week, 9 to 5. They work shift patterns, they work other things. If you think about, police officers who do night shifts or, fire officers who do night shifts, they often do, some on and then they have like a week off. Or you look at people who work on oil rigs who go on the oil rig for a month and then come home for a month and that sort of thing. So we can be creative and flexible and make life better for people. So my approach to all of these things is, let's stop thinking about what we're used to and what makes sense to us, because that's what we were taught, and think about what environment can we create that's going to make people want to come to work and feel rested and enthusiastic when they're in the workplace. So I'm a huge fan of it. And if it's not, we don't call it 4-day week, as I said, we call it 3-day weekend, although we're very strict about that too. People can't swap their Monday or their Friday for another day in the week. It's about a 3-day weekend. We want you to have 3 full days of rest where you're not thinking about work, where you're doing your stuff, you're in your own space, so that when you come back to work, it's really good, because they can use their holiday for other days if they want to take days off, So, I think we just have to be open and creative, and the world is changing, and I can't see why the world of work can't change along with it. There you go. Therein endeth the sermon.
Yeah, that's very good. Very good. I'm quite persuaded. I still think there are some people that would like to work 5 days and some who'd like to work 2 days and some, but very much with you on the point about the self-regulation and teams policing themselves and spotting and supporting or challenging one another when someone isn't pulling their weight. A lot more of that goes on than it ever used to, and is so much more effective than, if I think back 10 years, the amount of time that was spent things escalating up the organization in order for someone in seniority to tell someone else they weren't doing what they were doing. It's not motivational or helpful or fulfilling to the people who are receiving the message, or the people who are having to deliver them, because you're so far away from a real understanding of what people are trying to achieve with one another.
We haven't had a single performance management issue ever since we introduced our 3-day weekend, combined also with remote working, where you'd think it might be easier for people who work remotely to swing the leg. We don't have any issues with that at all. My people are, apart from day, I mean, everybody has off days. Sometimes they're tired, sometimes their heart's not in it, sometimes they're not feeling great, sometimes they're pissed off. So of course you have those days. So they don't work at optimum performance, the whole, because nobody does. But overall, it's all at a very high level. And I think it's because we just trust them. It's like, and once people feel trusted, they kind of don't want to betray that trust, and also that's when their colleagues sort of, they feel an obligation to their colleagues, not to their boss. And I think that's much more powerful. It's the military model. It's how, when you're training soldiers or sailors or air people, I don't know what they say with that now, but air staff, what you actually teach them is loyalty to their team. It's like, I don't want to let my mates down, so I am going to throw myself in front of that, whatever. And I think that's the most powerful thing you can do, is if you get people to feel loyal to each other and not loyal to you as the boss, that's much longer lasting and much more effective.
Yeah, I think our mates across the NSBCC include individuals who have to work shifts to particular patterns, as I've described earlier, and they deserve to be respected. And then there are other staff who have to be present in the workplace because they have to be face to face with children and working with one another in difficult and stressing environment. And I've had, again, I can't remember if I've mentioned this before, but I had some really interesting conversations with the guy who was chief executive of Lidl through the lockdown, and how you get the right language to communicate with your frontline workers who are out there on the tills and in the shops and must be there, but also motivate your people who are working remotely and not having to go into head office and really enjoying that and kind of not wanting to go back. Well, they are different jobs, but they're all part of the same team. And I think we've always had that. We've always had some staff who've worked 100% from home. We've always had some staff who are required to work 100% in the office, and everything in between. Although loads more of us now hybrid, working sometime in the office, sometime at home, including the senior managers. I cannot believe that I used to commute from here into London every day, 5 days a week, 1 hour 45 in each direction.
I know, crazy.
I enjoy it now, but to have to do it every day would feel relentless.
Well, I think it's a bigger conversation about remote working, because it's another thing that I'm really interested in and quite an advocate for where it's possible. Of course, it's not possible in every environment. You need your police officers on the streets, nurses in the ward. So I get that. But actually, there are ways of working around it. But so why don't we save that for another podcast? Because I'd love to talk about successes and failures in remote working. And, and the thing about remote working, well, we'll talk about it another time. I'm already tempted to go in, and I'm not sure how long we've been talking for this time, but it feels like about half an hour. Yeah.
27 minutes.
27 minutes, yeah. Yes. My internal clock is a bit, but so and of course we're hurting into we at DSC we're banning, of course we don't, but we have this big joke about not using the C word. We've got one of my directors is super enthusiastic about Christmas and keeps bringing up the C word all the time, and there are the rest of us who are like, don't you dare mention the 1st of December, don't you dare mention it until then. So we have this real sort of banter going on about when is it appropriate to start prepping for Christmas. I'm very much of the wait till it's December brigade, but my team are like, they're happy to start talking about it in August.
Working now in extended overtime, when I was supposed to have finished at the NSBCC in September, I eventually thought, look, I'm just going to organise my leaving party, and that'll force the issue. So I picked the last possible day I could, bearing in mind that Thursday is the new Friday in town now. So I picked the last possible Thursday before all the Christmas party season kicks in. So my leaving party is imminent, but beyond there, I've still got another 2 weeks of work to do. I don't actually finish
parties, Peter. Presumably parties.
Yes, party. There's a number of parties of different forms over the coming couple of weeks, and then yes, although you say not mentioning the C word, Christmas is a massively important time for fundraising for lots of charities, isn't it? So that's another thing we could return to, I think, on a future episode about Christmas and fundraising and charity Christmas ads and all of that. Lots of
definitely, and charity advertising generally, actually, which is a very emotive and difficult. I don't think we've spoken about that before, but very difficult and emotive subject, isn't it? Well, I think we've talked ourselves out of this. Well, we haven't, of course, Peter, because we could have carried on, because, we've always got more to say. But for this particular episode of Debra and Peter doing a podcast, I think we've come to a natural close. Do you?
Yeah, I do. That's great. Lovely to see you. And same time next week.
Leaving you, Peter. Yeah, will do.
Thanks.
Okay. Thanks.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.